Dear all, I warmly welcome you to the webinar, Retailing and Consumerizing from the Improbable to the Inevitable. I'm happy to introduce you to our speakers. Professor Dr. Karolin Frankenberger is the Academic Director of the Executive MBA, HSG, and Chair Owner and Director of the Institute of Management and Strategy of the University of St.Gallen. Her research topic primarily focused on business model innovation, business transformation, and sustainability. In addition, Professor Dr. Karolin Frankenberger has a proven record of accomplishment in management consultancy, McKinsey & Company, and her in-depth industry knowledge enables her to succeed in her current role at the University of St.Gallen. Her book, Developing Business Models, 55 Innovative Concepts with the St.Gallen Business Model Navigator, is an international bestseller and has been translated into several languages. Our second speaker is Michael Forhez. He is Global Managing Director of Global Consumer Market Industry Solution Groups. He brings more than 30 years of sales, marketing and management consulting experience to his current role, having worked for Unilever and Kraft Foods. He serves as an evangelist within the consumer marketplace and has committed his career to engaging with various stakeholders to better understand and reflect their collective requirements. We will start the presentation with Michael, followed by Professor Dr. Karolin Frankenberger. In the end, we will open up for Q&A. Michael, please, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much to all of you who are making the time to join us for today's conversation. I welcome you from America, where I am currently right now, and in fact in Silicon Valley, one might argue the heart of technology enablement, although certainly there are many places around the world today who are making use of technology to both enable and in often cases are part of the grand disruption that we are now seeing taking place in all vertical markets across the world. The conversation that Karolin and I have crafted for you today is meant to do several things, certainly to inform, but also to inspire. Our directive in this instance isn't to answer all of your questions, but provoke questions. In other words, to get each of us, all of us, those of you who are joining remotely, but in this conversation, to consider the art of the possible. So with that, let me begin with some thoughts just to get us started. It should come as no secret today that disruption has overtaken the markets, whether we're talking in consumer goods, retail, fashion, automotive, the academy, higher education. In virtually every instance across the world and in every domain, technology has taken hold in the imagination of end users, and as a result has inspired new thinking about ways of doing business. So as a start to the thesis, for those of you who may not be familiar with Taleb, there's a great book. It's known as The Black Swan. And the idea behind The Black Swan is that there are uncanny events that take place in time that we're not always recognizing. Things happen years ago that set the stage for the present that we're now living into. And so let's look at a current example of that. Roughly 24 years ago, a young man opened a bookstore in his garage with the idea of selling books online. Now, this was kind of extraordinary. His friends and his family said, well, that's not going to work very well. Shoppers like to go into bookstores. We share in the experience of reading and exploring what's possible through knowledge and inspiration. And part of the experience of going into a bookstore is as important as buying and actually reading the book. So why would anybody even think about buying a book online? Well, this young man continued with his dream, and it wasn't very long after, but he actually bought a company a couple of years ago for $13.6 billion. The company you may know is Whole Foods. It's a major grocery retailer here in the United States. Within a week of making that purchase, the combined capital of value of some of the largest retailers in the United States, among them Target, Walmart, Costco, and Kroger, lost $26.7 billion. So this would be a great example of both disruption and the idea of the Black Swan. That is, something that happened some time ago in history, an event which we didn't anticipate or understand the implications of. And then fast forward, here we are in the present tense, and a complete upset of the orders of business as we had known it, in this case, grocery retailing. So today's conversation, as I had outlined, we've broken it down into three thoughts. First, why is this time in the consumer products and retail sector like none other? If we look back through time, 100 years ago, retailing was invented, right? Retailing as we know it, a self-service event. And today it's shaping up with online and offline, with direct-to-consumer from manufacturers, with lockers, through a whole series of events now possible, we can actually order products at the speed of thought. So why is this time, again, why is this time in the consumer products and retail sector like none before? And why do we have to acknowledge this truth in order to manifest the future now unfolding before us? What are some examples that we can discuss that actually point out how this is taking hold, these changes are taking hold? And finally, a use case, if you will, for a major retailer that has actually begun this transformation on its way to satisfying today's connected consumers. So it would be inescapable to have this conversation if we didn't actually acknowledge that today's connected consumer is a global event. All of us, we're sharing almost 24/7, depending on your proclivities, the emails we sent, the text messages that we sent, the Twitter feeds that we share, online on Facebook and so forth. There are a myriad of ways by which we communicate our hopes and our dreams and our desires, the things that we love, the things that we aspire to, and so forth. And what this has created is an extraordinary amount of information that not only are we sharing between ourselves, but that manufacturers and retailers have to recognize as being created. And of course, the big challenge is, how do we take that information, or that data, if you will, transmit that data into information, transmit that information into insight, and from there, what do we do with that insight to create action in the furtherance of our goals? This is one of the chief operating issues of corporations the world over. And why does this matter? I mean, in just your market alone, the market of Switzerland, we see the tremendous impact that consumers are having with respect to the information that they have at their ready disposal. Now, as was mentioned in my bio, I worked at Unilever at the early part of my career and at Kraft Foods as well. And in my stewardship in brand management and product development and sales and marketing generally, what we understood then was that we were the brand stewards. We actually controlled the messaging of the brand's equity through the transmission and the utilization of mass marketing, television, radio, and print. This was a bi-directional modem by which we communicated the brand's essence to the consumer. Of course, today, consumers now have greater control. The products that we buy, we communicate authentically, if you will, to our friends and family, and to those of us who are essentially cohort leads. We drive brand equity by the things that we share with others. So therefore, we have become de facto brand managers in our own right. The recognition, again, of this is that for major retailers and marketers, brand marketers, major brands, the power has shifted from we to them to all of us. Okay, so disruption has obviously taken hold all across the world, and the ability for manufacturers and retailers to recognize their input and be able to articulate to the market their views, their strategy, and their goals is reflected in the market's recognition. In other words, if you're very clear about your intention, if you understand what you're trying to do, if you can communicate that to your shareholders and to the consumers that you would hope to serve, the market will recognize you. If you cannot, the market is going to penalize you. And the implications of this obviously are capital resources which will be made at your disposal for the transformation that you will need to fund as you reinvent yourself for this new era. So let's talk a little bit about what's happening. And I'm just going to point out a couple things. Some of you may be aware of a company called the Dollar Shave Club. That's illustrated at the top on the right. Very quickly, the story of this corporation is a young man who woke up one morning and he realized that he wasn't going to get a clean shave. He had a shaver and it had dulled, and now he had to go through the experience of shaving, and it wasn't going to be a pleasant morning for him. As he goes to the office, he realizes he's going to have to go to the pharmacy at the end of the day and buy new shaving gear. So he pulls into the parking lot, he walks into the pharmacy, he's got to find the shaving gear, it's there somewhere in the store. He finally finds it, but it's in a locked down box. Now he's got to find a merchant who will unlock the box so that he can buy his shaving gear. This takes place, he goes to the checkout, he completes his purchase, he gets in his car, he goes home. And he says to himself, why do I have to go through this tedious experience? I know how many shavers I'm going to use a month. And he conceives in his mind a subscription model for buying shaving gear. And he uses the technology of the day. He actually uses his iPhone and he records the entire experience as he experienced it only the day before, and he puts it on YouTube, and it becomes a great sensation. And out of this, he invents a company called the Dollar Shave Club. He essentially creates a company. He doesn't have any manufacturing capability. He doesn't have a distribution process, no real marketing to speak of. And he decides he's going to market razor blades in a subscription model. You buy what you want. He sends it to you on cadence. And this company becomes a great sensation. And some years later, not too long afterwards, Unilever buys the Dollar Shave Club for $1 billion American. Now, that's half the story. The other half, to the left, is the story of Procter & Gamble and Gillette. Okay, arguably the best razor blade made. In fact, one would consider it a surgical instrument. And Procter & Gamble, as we all know, is a 100-year-old plus company, arguably the inventor of modern brand management. And when Procter & Gamble was queried by the Wall Street Journal the night that the deal between the Dollar Shave Club and Unilever was taking place, they were asked, how did you miss this? And to their credit, but really as an afterthought, they said, well, we just weren't listening. It was always there. We just weren't listening. So what's behind this story? Here's a young man who doesn't have anything like the resources of Procter & Gamble, a global phenom, who invents a company and almost overnight reinvents the shaving experience, reinvents men's and women's shaving. And I think that what we have to recognize in this story is the idea of disruption. Okay, so along the bottom then, just a couple of the examples. We're moving from grocery retailing as we have known it for really 100 years to retailing that's at the speed of thought, to retailing which is frictionless. For those of you who may be aware, Amazon Go now, who started as an experiment in Seattle, is getting to roll out stores all across the United States and is on path, predicted to open thousands upon thousands of stores where there will not be a cash register, where there will not be a front end of the store, where you will walk into the store, you will take a product off the shelf, and you will just walk out. This is the future of retailing. Ocado, a company based in the UK, has invented a technology for essentially a warehouse with only a handful of people working it. and trucks that span all across the UK every day, delivering products direct to your door. And then, of course, there are other ways to take possession of product, whether it's direct to your door or through lockers. So all told here, we're looking at disruption taking hold in the consumer markets at an unprecedented rate of velocity. And it's going to wholly reinvent how we imagine products going to market, whether in-store or direct to consumers. Okay, so how does this taking shape right now? Well, consumers obviously are in the driver's seat. At the bottom left, you have such companies offering discount opportunities, right? Limited number of SKUs in the assortment, but low cost, easy to shop stores. In the middle, the very large corporations who have done a great job in serving consumers over the years with a wide variety of SKUs at various price structures with different formats. And on the right, examples of companies who are what we call the disruptors, the digital natives, okay? So if you don't know about Warby Parker, you should look this up. Google it today. An example of a company that is actually selling eyeglasses online and has been so successful that now they're opening up stores of their own. Stitch Fix, a company that makes it possible for you to order your clothing online with an algorithm that determines, based on your input, how many clothes you want to buy a month. Are you pre-professional? Are you a lawyer? Are you an academic? Are you a marketeer as myself? And will actually put together a box of clothing to suit your every need at the price point of your desire, right? And then, of course, Alibaba and Amazon. These are the companies that are reinventing commerce by not necessarily having any product, but setting up collectives, if you will, where product is actually available online and you can buy all over the world, all right? So these disruptors are engaging consumers in ways that only a few years ago would have been unimaginable. Okay, but what are we talking about here? What's really different? And what's really different, let's just hypothesize for a moment. Perhaps there never was any such thing as a mass market. In fact, it was an invented idea. It might be argued that Henry Ford started this with the manufacturing of the Model T. But we have moved beyond the Model T. You know, there was an urban myth, right, where people would say, we're told to say to management of Ford Motor Company, well, we want a different color card and color of the car. And when that was communicated, Henry Ford, he had said, well, they can have any color as long as it's black. Well, we have moved beyond that now. Consumers are actually asking for a degree of personalization, not just in how they're served, but in the products that are being manufactured for them. So what does this mean? Manufacturers can no longer make what they wish to sell. They must manufacture what consumers want. This is giving rise to bespoke manufacturing, custom-made sneakers, custom-made eyeglasses, custom-made food. Retailers can no longer buy from manufacturers what they hope to sell to consumers. They must purchase what consumers have already determined they are going to buy. So this is causing a tremendous disruption in the supply chain ecosystem. Technology has now made it necessary for manufacturers and retailers to collectively reinvent how they will serve, again, today's connected consumer. So for those of you who have been in retailing for any length of time, whether you went to B school or not, you may recognize Kotler's 4 Ps, okay? And we assume that when this thesis for serving consumers was invented, that the consumer was at the center of it, but it really wasn't. It was invented for the purposes of mass manufacturing and retailing. But now consumers are at the very center of the equation, and it's these various technologies arrayed in this circle that you see here below that make it possible for consumers to engage brands and determine for themselves what it is they're going to buy, how it is they're going to use it, how they're going to be served going forward. Okay, so obviously there's an epochal shift taking place, and this requires a different form of engagement. So we're confronting change at near light speed, all right? Which means we're moving from a period of time when category management will have to be reinvented. We're moving from share of shelf to share of couch. We're moving from understanding consumers as we think about them to actually listening consumers as they really are. We're moving from the store on the corner, all right, where we are, to the shopper where they are, whether they're shopping from their home, they're shopping from their office, they're shopping from the seat of their car while they're in traffic. This is an entirely different means by which we will serve, again, today's connected consumer. So really quickly then for you, let me throw out a story for consideration. Now, I mentioned that I had started my career at Unilever, but actually it began even earlier with Revlon, one of the largest cosmetics companies in the world. And so I have a fondness for the cosmetics industry. And so I illustrate today for you just some of the numbers around beauty care. And this is obviously a sector that continues to increase in its throw weight. And what you can see is a degree of data specialization, right? So, loyalty programs have been around for a long time, and Sephora, the company that we're talking about, has made good use of them. But what they also recognized is that notwithstanding 80% of their customers already inside their loyalty scheme, 20% of the possible customers out there are not being addressed. So Sephora needed to reinvent the store of the future with those customers, including their current customers, in mind. And so they created an experience for shopping predicated on the utilization of various technologies and with the insights that they gleaned from their frequent shopper programming. And so the store today looks very different than only a few years ago. And how do I know that? How I know that is actually by having gone into this store. So very quickly then, before I turn over to Karolin, if you walk into a flagship store of Sephora in San Francisco, what you see is an array of technologies that make use of what we're talking about, disruption. To the center in the middle, you see a kiosk where shoppers are communicating all over the world their beauty secrets. On the upper right-hand corner is some technology, a diagnostic tool, which helps the clinician assess a man or a woman or a man's skin care. In other words, the presence of too much sun and damage to the skin, or the moisturizer being used may be too rich, and so forth, and therefore can construct a regimen for that person's beauty care. At the lower middle, there's a kiosk where you can input what it is you're looking for in terms of fragrances. An algorithm will generate, instead of me looking for 100 different fragrances for my wife, I actually can say, well, she likes it spicy versus sweet, and she wants it light versus heavy, and my price point is X versus Y, and instead of scanning the shelf against 100 possible permutations of fragrances I might buy, 10 then become illustrated. And then I make that purchase decision, and on the corner on the right, I actually can hand that beautiful bottle of fragrance to the person who's serving me, and they will place it inside this structure, and you will have an engraved, personalized product. So this is all an illustration of retailing as it's coming into vogue today. And on the left, you see myself. Actually, I spent several hours with the clinician, and what I did note in the midst of the time I spent in Sephora is something quite unusual. Everybody seemed happy, not just the shoppers, but the clinicians who were helping them with their beauty care regimen. And I asked the person who I was doing this conversation with, having this conversation, you seem so happy. Can you explain why? And she had said to me, because we're not here to sell. And I said, well, what are you here to do? She said, we're here to serve. We are here to serve. And that's the story of Sephora, and I think that well illustrates the story of retailing unfolding in today's market. So with that in mind, I'd like to turn it over to my esteemed partner today so that Karolin might be able to explain to you what is transformation and how might we bring this about in our own companies. Karolin.
Michael, thank you very much for this great presentation and for your great thoughts. And welcome from my side. I would like to talk about a bit about what does it mean? So what are the challenges? Why is it so difficult to transform your organization? And I'm doing a lot of research in that field, and I'm happy to share my recent results with you. So for me, the biggest challenge that we really see, and that's not only unique for the retail industry, but also for other industries. So the biggest challenge is really to overcome your current business model. So Uber yourself before you get Kodaked, that's how I call it. And you can see it on this chart here. So I see it like with the two S curves, and it really reflects what I see, what a lot of companies struggle with. So we are not startups typically. We do have a current business model, and we do have a current business that is running. And therefore, we need to understand that while we still continue doing our current business, we need to think about transforming our business in parallel. And that does not mean that we can do that from today to tomorrow, but it really means that we need to think about new initiatives, new ideas, new thoughts about how our business could look like in the future. And we just heard a lot of examples. And this is kind of how you can think about it. So you have your current business model, and you should continue doing your current business, like having your stores, serving your customers as you served them in the past 100 years. But in addition to that, you need to think about what comes next. What is the next business model? What do we need to do in order to enthuse our customers in the future as well? And that's the lower line, so the gray one, so that you think about a new business model, a new way of serving your customers, a new way of creating value for your customers. And today we are somewhere in the middle. So you still have your current business model that is still profitable, and it still helps you to gain revenues and profits. But in the future, at some point of time, this business model might not be profitable anymore. And therefore, you need to be prepared. You need to have the business models ready, and you need to have made the experience in order to shift the resources and the capabilities to this new form of business model in order to continue working on your new business model and continue being successful with your business. And it's also important that it's not about shifting all resources today from the red to the gray curve. It's really important that you have success on both curves, because on the red curve, you still continue doing your business as you did in the past. But then in parallel to that, we focus on this new business. And at some point of time, when this new business picks up, then you can shift the resources to the new business. And this is also helpful, because then you need the management capabilities that helped you in the past to be successful. And then you can shift them to the new business in order to be successful with the new business as well. So therefore, success on both curves is key to success. So what I'm really convinced of, it's not, we hear a lot about technology, about AI, about blockchain, etc. And Michael, you also mentioned a lot more of those technologies. But for me, it's really key that executives do understand that it's not, that having the technology is important, but it's not the decisive factor. So it's really about changing your business model. It's about thinking about your business model and try to really change the business model and change the way how you create value. It's important that you understand the technologies, but just understanding the technologies and applying the technologies will not help you to be successful. It really changes your entire business model. And like the example, Michael, you mentioned with the $1 Shave Club, obviously they use technology, but also they change the technology. So from paying per blade and now sending it in a subscription mode to the customer, so that they pay an upfront fee and then they get regular deliveries of their shaves. So it's really about the business model, and that's key to understand. So business model innovation, not technologies, determine success or failure in digital transformation. So you need to understand what is your current business model and what will be your future business model in order to be successful. So what really is a business model? So a business model basically is composed of 4 dimensions. So you can see that in a triangle here. So a business model really describes the business that you're doing. So first of all, it describes the what. So what do you offer to your customer? What is the value proposition that you offer to the customer? And coming back to the $1 shave example, it's not about that it's really the value is that this guy doesn't need to go to the store anymore. This guy gets the product delivered to his house, and that's the value proposition. And that's what you need to think about. What do our customers want, and what is the value they appreciate, and they are open to pay extra money for it. So that's the what. And then the how is really how is the value proposition created? So how do you create the value proposition? Do you do it on your own, or do you do it together with partners? So nowadays we talk a lot about ecosystem. So not all innovations need to be done on your own. You can do it together with partners. You can do it even together with competitors. So for example, Daimler and BMW, they are now joining forces in order to be prepared for the disruption in the mobility industry. And that we could not have thought of that in the past years, but nowadays that's feasible and that's possible in order to join forces, in order to be successful, and in order to compete against those digital natives. And Michael, you also mentioned those. It might make sense to join forces even with your competitors in order to have a stronger force and to have make a bigger impact in the market. So that's the how. And then we have the value. So how do you create? How is revenue created? So how can you generate revenues? How can you generate profits? So that's really the revenue and the profit mechanism. So it's not about selling the plates in like the boxes, coming back to this example, but offering a subscription model so that you pay on a regular basis, and that's how you earn the money. So it's really also part of the business model. And then finally and ultimately, so the most important element is who is our customer. Therefore, it's in the center of the triangle. So customers also for business model innovations should be in the center of all our efforts. What do our customers want? What is the customer journey? How can we make sure that we create something that has value for our customers? So this basically describes a business model. And business model innovation now means that you have to change 2 or even more out of those 4 dimensions. So if you only would change the what, for example, it's more a product innovation. If you only change the who, the how, it's more process innovation. But business model innovation means really changing 2 or more out of those 4 dimensions. Then we talk about a business model innovation. And it's also important, you see that in this red box. So business model innovation always needs to lead to value creation and value capture. So it needs to create additional value and new value for your customers or for potential new customers. But you also need to make sure that ultimately you as an organization or as an ecosystem can capture value out of this new business model. And this value capture can be new revenues, new profits, but also an increased user bases, etc. So these can all be value capture mechanism. But you need to make sure that you pay attention to value capture mechanism as well. So why is it then so difficult? We all know that disruption is underway. We all know that business model innovations are important. And based on this study, you can see 80% of companies say they need to transform their business model. But interestingly, only 10% really do it. So although we all know that business model innovation is so important, only a minority really focuses and does business model innovation. Why is this the case? Why? And this question really interested me, and therefore I put a lot of research effort into understanding this question and the solution and the answer a bit better. So what we really figured out is that the core challenge of nowadays is that executives really struggle with breaking through the dominant logic of their industry, because they have been in the industry for years and they have done their business model for years in a similar way, but now they really need to think differently about this. They need to think outside the box, and that's so challenging. So how can you do something really different than your competitors did it? And only if you do something really different, then you can be successful. If you only do incremental changes, you will still be on this red curve. And you remember the first slide that I showed. If you only do incremental changes, if you digitize your processes, you're still on the red curve, but you need to try to get on the gray curve to do something really totally different. And therefore you need to think outside the box. So what we did an intensive research project, 5 years of intensive research. We did a detailed analysis of all major successful business model innovators in the last 50 years. And the good news is we found something. And the very good news is it works very well. And we have tested and tried it out in, 100 companies and in different industries. And we always came up with very disruptive and radical new business models. So the result is here. It's quite easy and simple and easy to understand. So that's not really, but I'll explain it in a minute. That's our business model innovation map, but the message behind is really simple. So what we figured out is that all the business model innovations that are out there, all the ones that Michael mentioned, are not really new to the world. So they are really based on business models that have been there already in the world, but in different industries. So what those companies did, they tried to understand what is out there, and then they adapted those business models to their own industry. And by doing that, they disrupted their own industry. So it's not that challenging, actually. You just need to see, you need to observe what is out there, you need to listen. And I think, Michael, you mentioned that, that they didn't listen to what is out there. So it's important to listen, to observe what is out there, and then adapt it to your own industry. So business model innovation map, that's how we call it. And just to explain it a bit, and that fits to the $1 Shave Club. So razor and blade. So this is a pattern that has been used in different industry, and always it helped the focal company that used it to disrupt their own industry. So it means basic products are cheap or given away for free, and the consumables that are needed to be used or operated on the other side are expensive and sold at high margin. And we tried to figure out when this was used the first time, and we couldn't really find the starting date of when this pattern was used the first time. But one that is really far back is like Rockefeller was his Standard Oil company. So he used the same business model logic. So he gave the oil lamps for free to the population. And then afterwards, he sold the oil for a high price, because then he said, okay, now you have the lamp already. Now you obviously want to have my oil in order to have the light in the evenings and to read books, etc. So that was the first incident that we recognized where they used this pattern. And then a couple of years later, Gillette used it in the razor industry. And then Hewlett-Packard used it in the printing industry. So you have the printers that are quite cheap, but then the cartridges are quite expensive. Nestle and Nespresso, they disrupted the coffee industry with the same pattern. So you get a cheap coffee machine, and then the capsules are quite expensive, and you even pay 3, 4, 5 times the price of just getting the coffee in the retail store in this pack. And then Apple, iPod, iTunes, similar construct. So you have the iPod that is expensive and the songs that are quite cheap. Nestle Specialty, so they even leverage it within their own organization. So they used it for the tea business and also for the baby food business or for the milk business. But I have to admit, this one is not very successful, the last one. So also the big ones kind of struggle in order to be successful with business model, but at least they tried it out and they thought it might be a market there as well. But they kind of stopped with operating in the baby food business. But they are quite successful in the tea business. And again, Unilever didn't come up with that idea, although Unilever is much stronger in the tea business. But Nestle, based on their experience with the business model coming from the coffee business, just leveraged this business model and tried it out in the tea business as well. And now they try to create their market in the tea business. So what are the 3 strategies that we recognize coming out of that research project? So first of all, you can transfer one business model pattern from one industry to another industry, or you can combine different business models and create your own pattern, kind of, or you can leverage it, as we just saw it with Nestle, and use it in different product market industries. So then the learnings, and this really surprised us, is 90% of all business model innovations are really recombinations. So all those great examples that we always hear, the $1 Shave Club, the Alibabas, and all the other ones, they are not really new to the world. They are really based on recombining what is already there. And this is over 90%, and that really surprised me. And second learning, 55 patterns to systematically innovate your business model. So these colors, they are all like kind of patterns like the razor and blade business model that can be used in order to disrupt your own industry. So, and if that worked in the past, so going forward, you can just use those 55 patterns, apply them to your retail industry, and then see how you can disrupt your industry and do something totally different, and that different than your competitors, and therefore create your competitive advantage. And therefore, business model innovation is craft rather than art. You don't need to wait to have like the Steve Jobs within your organization, but you really can start doing it tomorrow. You can work on it, and you have to work on it in a systematic manner. Otherwise, you will not be successful in disrupting your industry. So these are the 55 patterns, so you can then use them. And what we typically do, we confront your business model, or you can then confront your business model with the 55 business model patterns. And this brings you to truly novel business ideas. So for example, we would then ask the question, how would Rolls-Royce conduct your business? And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but Rolls-Royce, they do not sell the airline engines, but they rent it per hour that it is in usage. So this means, okay, if you would adapt this business model pattern to your retail industry, would that mean I do not sell the products anymore, but the customer just pays for the hours that he or she uses the product? So if I buy the razor, to get back to this example, I do not pay like, I don't know, 10 francs or 20 francs for the razor, but I only pay when I use the razor. And this might be then an inspiration based on this business model from another industry. And then you can think about, okay, does it make sense or not, or how can we extend it? And what does it mean for our industry? In addition to that, now when we think about, okay, how can we come up with new ideas? The real challenge is that a lot of digital transformations or transformations in general fail. Companies are not successful, even if they have a great idea, they are not successful in implementing that idea and bring it to the market. So you can see here, for digital transformation, only 16% are really successful. So why is that the case? Even if you have a great idea, why do we fail in implementing that idea? And the main reasons are therefore, and always when I talk to executives, they say, oh, obviously because we don't have the budget, we don't have the resources, we cannot implement that. But interestingly, that's not the reason. That's only a minor reason. So the major reason is here. So the main reason really is employees are resistant to change. And the second most important reason is management behavior is not supportive of change. So it's really about the soft factors that decide upon if you are successful or not with the transformation. And this is the second research that really interested me, and I put a lot of effort and energy into elaborating these questions over the last weeks and months and years even. And currently I'm in the process of really putting that together and writing a paper and a book about that. And what I figured out is that it's really about the soft factors that decide if a company is successful or not. So even, as I said, even if you have the best idea, this doesn't help you if you're not able to bring that idea through your organization and implement that idea and bring it to the market ultimately. So what we figured, we're currently in the process of designing that. So what we came up with is kind of this, what we call the digital transformation engine. So you really need to pay attention to those 6 elements that you see here in order to be successful. So first of all, you need to have the right people that are able to make this transformation happen. So if you only have like those kind of managers that grew up, that performed in this old world, for them it might be difficult to adapt to this new world. So maybe you want to think about reskilling your people, hire new people in order to make sure that they understand the need in the market and that they understand the customers and that they are open for changing the organization and the business model. It's also about leadership. So you need to have the right leaders that are able to lead in the kind of old world on the red curve, but also able to lead on the gray curve. And that's not easy. There are not a lot of people around there that are able to combine both worlds. And then it's also about culture. You need to have the right culture in place. And I guess you're all familiar with that saying, but it's still very true. So culture eats strategy. And even if you have the greatest strategy, if you don't have the right culture in place within your organization, you won't be successful with the digital transformation. The fourth one, the processes. You need to have the right processes. You need to be able to test business models, because obviously all the ideas that you might have, most of them will not be successful. Therefore, you need to have the processes in order to test, in order to have this failure culture, in order to make sure you can define the assumptions and then test the assumptions and learn from those assumptions. Next one, you need to have the right organizational structure. You need to have small, agile teams that work on those topics. You need to have teams that might be located in startup centers that are separate from your core organization, so that they have the freedom, the autonomy, the flexibility to try out new things, to fail, and not to get distracted by the core business. And you need to understand the technology. You need to know what technology is out there and how this technology can help you and can enable you in developing your business model further. You don't need to develop the technology, but you need people that understand the technology and then can make this important translation from what does this technology mean for our business. And just to give you some more ideas what I'm thinking about currently, so this refers to skills and leadership. So in order to be successful with the transformation, this is based on a radical rethinking across the entire organization. So it's a bit difficult to read, but just to highlight some of them. So the left side is like referring to the red curve, to the current business. And the right side, the gray one, refers to the second S-curve, to this gray S-curve. So in the old world, it was sufficient to think about customer, relationship management. But now in the new world, you need to think about customer journey, about user experience. So what are the needs of your customers? What do those customers value? Do I really understand the needs of the customers? And how can I shape my services so that I address the needs that are out there? In the old world, it was sufficient to improve and to make your current business model a bit better, to incremental innovation. On the gray curve, it's about really radical, disruptive business model innovation. In the old world, it was sufficient to do innovation management out of the R&D department. You had your R&D department, and they thought about that, and they came up with new products or new ideas or new service ideas. But in the new world, it's really about everybody should be involved in this innovation process. So you need your salespeople, you need your employees that are working in the stores because they understand what the customers want. So it's really innovation management out of marketing and out of technology. From fight for each % in the market share, what you have on the left-hand side. So you fight for each % of the market share. Are you better than your competitors? Are you some market share percentages better? But that's not relevant on the right-hand side. On the right-hand side, it's about the winner takes it all. You think about platform models. You think about generating users, and in order to thinking about the big picture. And the left-hand side is more about linear thinking, and the right-hand side is about exponential thinking, etc. So I could go on and on, but I guess you understand which message I want to bring across. So it's really the left-hand side is you need to do that, and you still need to continue doing that in order to be successful on the first S-curve, but you also need to think about how to be successful on the second S-curve. And you need different leadership capabilities, different management capabilities, different people, different backgrounds, etc. And you can do that by reskilling, but you might also want to think about hiring new people. So, and then also I mentioned that already, culture. So culture is really eating strategy if you're not, but you can shape culture and you can think about your culture. So fail early, fail cheap, success factors of A/B pitches, use premises, not perfect business cases, strong focus on business model, pivoting is an option. So even if the team fails after a couple of weeks that thinks about a disruptive business model, they can pivot and go in totally different direction. That's what they should do in order to learn, because with each mistake they can learn, and therefore you need to enforce that as well. And you also, if they are not successful, you need to make sure that they have attractive new jobs within the organization. So, and this kind of is all about, it's about leadership, but you need to lead your business, your current business, but also your future business. You need to lead others to make sure that they have the freedom and the autonomy in order to work on things like that. But you also need to lead yourself. You need to be a role model for your organization. You need to be innovative as well. You need to make failures as well. And this is all kind of very important in order to make sure that your organization changes and is successful in developing initiatives on gray curve, but also in implementing these new initiatives in the market. So these are my thoughts, more coming from a theoretical background. And now I think it's time to ask you the question, what is your black swan? So that's a golden opportunity. What are your thoughts about how to disrupt your industry and how to make sure that you can also be successful in the future?
Many thanks for Dr. Frankenberger and Michael. We will now open up for Q&A. So in case you have any questions, please write them in. I will read them out loud, and Professor Dr. Karolin Frankenberger and Michael will answer them. So the first question is coming in. With all the changes taking place in the consumer markets, how should management and those working for management make their case for a thoughtful approach which balances the books without foregoing the future?
Michael, do you want to start? And then
I think, Karolin, you pointed out earlier the cultural requirements in any organization. And I don't know that I heard that phrase before. Culture, how did you put it? Culture eats
strategy.
Culture eats strategy. So I think what we have to acknowledge is that perhaps the model that most of us inherited was something that was invented for an entirely different age. And so the culture is going to not just have to shift, but the culture itself may need to be reinvented. And we're seeing that now in how workplaces are being reinvented. We're seeing that in the degree to which people are allowed to come to offices more casually, but still the expectation is they're going to perform at above average capability. We're seeing the advantages of experience have to be balanced against the advantages of the new age, right? So the digital natives, right? Now, that doesn't mean you have to be a 20-something to understand the implications of new age technology, but it is incumbent upon management that comes from a previous generation to go out and literally experience the market as it's happening. Now, this is the reason why I personally go into grocery stores and retail stores and warehouses and manufacturing centers all the time, because I can't presume to know what I know anymore is even relevant. I have to actually go out and seek relevance. So I think that's part of what's going to be required. We need to encourage people to break free of convention. We need to understand that they're not going to be penalized for challenging orthodoxy, but rewarded for exactly that. And it's not always, in my view, about inventing the next great thing, because we don't know where that's going to come from. There's a phrase here in Silicon Valley. It's called failing fast. I'm not necessarily agreeing wholeheartedly with that, but I think if we fail fast, then we also need to succeed even faster. And so speed now is our advantage, as well as the insights that we glean from being present. And so I would throw it back over to you. Do you believe, in your own view, that we need to cause transformation in how we're being and becoming, not just how we're inventing and making?
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. I think, that's absolutely right. And in addition to that, I think it's really also an internal issue, how you deal with that. It's a management issue. So how can you make sure that you continue with what you do, but also make sure that you have the capabilities, the resources, and the people that think about the new topics. And it's just yesterday I had a call with a board member of Daimler, and he really understood it. So, and I had tons of interviews in the last month, but I really feel some people just hear it and they think they need to do it, but some other ones embrace it, and they really embrace it and make sure that happens in their organization. And this guy really understood it, and he said, okay, I know my people get it as well, and I'm a role model, because if I'm not doing it, I cannot expect that my people do that. And therefore, I need to try out things as well. Or as you say, I need to understand what the retail stores are about. I need to go in there, and I need to show them that I'm interested in this new world, and that I believe we need to understand it and we need to embrace it. And only then you can be successful. If it's only about, okay, I hear it and we might want to do it, but then I delegate it to someone, then it won't be successful.
Agreed.
So, absolutely.
Agreed.
We have another question. How many large companies are able to fully implement a second S-curve?
How many are able? How
many large companies are able to successfully implement a second S-curve?
Every 100% could be able to do that. So if you understand the concept, and if you are brave enough to go for that, and if you embrace it, and if you understand it, and if change is becoming part of your DNA, all incumbent companies can do that, and they have to do that, because if they don't do that, they will fail in the long term, and they will not stay successful. I'm totally convinced about that.
Yeah, so and if I may add to that, Karolin, my sense is particularly for well-established companies, what stands in the way of future success is prior success. Mm-hmm. And when we think about mass manufactured products, the brilliance of mass manufacturing was the capacity to repeat, right? So repetitive processes. We got very good at making lots of things very inexpensively, moving them through market relatively efficiently, and selling them at a price point that ensured long-term profitability. But that's no longer, that model can't be sustained much longer, if at all, because things are getting broken. And there's a company called Sears, everybody knows about it. It was a 100-year-old company. It was the Amazon of its day, bigger than Amazon is even right now, who could have been Amazon if it had wanted to be. But its success from the past stood in the way of its future success. They couldn't release from what made them so successful in order to invent what would have made them possible. So I think that we have to reconcile the fact that we have to be willing to part with our past in order to invent our future. It sounds like a hackneyed expression, but that's where the art of the possible comes from. It won't come from just constantly and repeatedly doing the same thing. We have to be willing to challenge orthodoxy in order to manifest the future in front of us.
Yeah. And just to add one more comment, I think that the key advantage then, if you are able to do that, and I know it's very tricky, it's very difficult, and it's very challenging to break orthodoxies, but then if you are able to do that, then you have a big advantage compared to the startups, because then if you need to scale at some point of time, then you have the management capabilities already in-house that you can use then in order to establish processes, in order to make sure that the scaling is successful as well. And a lot of startups struggle in that phase because they are then not able to, they don't have the management capabilities in order to do the scaling. And therefore, if you are able to break the orthodoxies, then afterwards you even have a competitive advantage compared to the startups out there.
Agreed.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more quick. Consumers have never been more empowered than they are today. What can retailers or who has served so well through their physical store do to make those shoppers welcome? And what role is there for suppliers to play?
I could start out with this, Karolin, and I'd be very interested in your point of view after I make a point. So what we have to appreciate is that the store as we've shopped it won't exist much longer. It's going through a real change in and of itself. The experience of a store is changing, right? So we invented mousetraps in many cases. The big department stores are like that, but are they providing a service value? So consumers want several things, and it depends on what their need state is at the moment. Do I have to get in and out real quickly to optimize my time allocation, or do I want to hang out and experience a cup of coffee, a glass of wine, a chance to share with my friend who's shopping with me? If I'm buying a high-tech product, maybe I'm going into a store. It's not filled with lots of technology, but it's filled with specific technology and people who can help me sort out, if you will, what I need, like audiophiles going into a Harman Kardon, right? You're not seeing hundreds of speakers. They're going to work their magic by helping you imagine what that speaker might sound like in your home, particularly if fidelity is something that you're looking for. So I think that what we're looking to do today in retail and is transform from trying to sell lots of stuff to help people understand what it is they need and want. And if you're a manufacturer, it's not making lots of stuff, it's finding out what people really need and want. And I think that's the future of the consumer markets currently unfolding. And I'd like your view on that.
No, I agree. Not much to add. I think it's really about understanding the consumers much more and try to understand it much better than we did in the past, and to understand what are the needs, what are the issues that they have, and what are the unmet needs that are out there. And based on that, then think about what do we want to sell in our store? How do we want to sell it? How can we meet the needs that are out there and meet the needs that are out there? And I think this is really what you said, just to reinforce that, really focusing on the consumer, focusing on the consumer journey. What does he need to do in order to get to the store? And even before he comes to the store, what are his thoughts or her thoughts? And then based on that, think about the offering that we will have in the future in order to address the needs in a better way.
Excellent.
Many thanks. With that, I would like to thank you all for participating in our webinar today. I hope we could inspire and inform you and answer some of your questions. Please feel free to reach out to us if you have any further questions. I would also like to thank our speakers, Professor Dr. Karolin Frankenberger and Michael Forhez. Thank you very much. And I wish you all a lovely rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.